Welcome to our new podcast series, Leading into the Future. My name is Randall Palm, and I'm Vice President of Sales here at Akamai Technologies, and excited to be here as we dig deeper into a critically important topic. So, why this podcast and why now? As we've now settled into somewhat of our new norm with how our organizations look and feel post pandemic, I was struggling with leading my team in a fully remote environment, ensuring a culture that took us 20 years to build wasn't lost, and not just coping with the new norm, but leveraging it. I've been fortunate enough in my career to build some amazing relationships with prominent leaders who come from different industries, backgrounds, and knew would provide unique perspective on how they're dealing with these challenges, which led to some amazing conversations. Throughout this series, I was accompanied by my friend and colleague Kate Prouty, CIO here at Akamai, who I've worked with for over 20 years, who brought her own experience and knowledge to these discussions. If you're a leader within your organization, which can range from an individual contributor all the way to the C suite, I promise you will find something within these discussions that either challenges your way of thinking, reinforces it, or falls somewhere in between. On today's episode, we are excited to have Kathy Kountze, CIO of Bose Corporation. I hope you enjoy. Welcome back to another edition of our podcast series, Leading into the Future. I'm Randall Palm, Vice President of Sales here at Akamai, and once again joined by Kate Prouty, our CIO and Executive Vice President at Akamai, who I've known and worked for a long time. And today I have special guest, Kathy Kountze. Kathy, you and I have known each other maybe 6-8 years now. She's been an industry leader at a number of different organizations. Today is a CIO over at Bose, who I think everyone's pretty familiar with, in addition to being on a board member at a number of different organizations, and thought her perspective on coming into Bose, as well as being on a board with different organizations who are all thinking about leadership, thinking about culture, thinking about back to work in very different ways. I thought she'd have a lot of really interesting perspectives to provide to everybody. So welcome, Kate. Welcome, Kathy. Thank you for taking the time. Kathy, before we start, maybe just a quick introduction. I got this long bio of all the great things that you've done in your career. And I know you said earlier it makes you feel tired, but I do think it also is very interesting, kind of your story, and from all the stuff that you've done and whatnot. So if you don't mind introducing yourself and where you're at today, I think that would be a great place to start.
Sure, absolutely. So thank you for having me.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, I've been at Bose now a little over a year. Went there after doing about a 1-year CIO role at a company called DentaQuest, which at the time was looking to bring in executives because they were planning on selling the company. So very targeted reason for kind of refreshing the executive team. Prior to that, I had spent 11 years at a company called Eversource, energy company, one of the largest ones in New England, and really got a lot of education about being a CIO working there. We went through an extremely large merger, lots of transformation, especially in how we were engaging customers. So being there 11 years went very quickly and was extremely beneficial for me for learning how to get better at being a CIO. Moved to DentaQuest, again, got to a place where, I wanted to learn how to be a CIO at other places. The idea of being a part of a leadership team that was going to sell a company was very enticing. I thought that was an interesting thing to do. It was supposed to be 3 years. It was a year, so I guess we did a good job. But after the company was sold to a larger organization, I made a decision again. It was a very big company, and I wanted to try something new. Once again, challenge myself in a different industry. At the time, I was on a board that sells recreational vehicles, so it was more consumer facing, and joined a second board, children's clothing line that was also consumer facing. And I said, I'd like to do something I think that's more consumer driven and get into more of that retail place. So I got a phone call, coincidentally, that there was an opening at Bose, and took that on. I'm thinking that the three together would be good for me to learn, to help the board be a productive board member, as well as vice versa, learn what these other companies were doing that I could bring back to my own organization. So that's what I've been doing. Been in technology a long, long time, but love it and still enjoying the challenges it brings.
Yeah. Yeah. And
I'm tired just listening to you, Kathy. I can't believe you have like a major full-time job at Bose as a CIO and you're on 2 boards. I mean, and
Yeah,
I know you have a son and maybe perhaps more children, but that's crazy.
yeah. There are those moments. Gotta keep doing.
yeah, maybe Kathy, there's a lot there, right, to kind of unpack. As you think about the 3 different companies, obviously Bose is kind of the full-time job, coming into that organization. I think most people are, being around New England, Bose, the history of it, Dr. Bose, out of MIT, and obviously being a private company, a little bit different, family run for the most part over the years. Coming into that organization a year ago, and a lot of the conversations we've had have been around, working through COVID and different leadership styles and whatnot. Like when you first took the job, what was your approach to kind of figuring out the landscape, right? In a little bit of a turmoil, not turmoil, but back to work, flex work, where everyone's still maybe figuring that out. But how did you approach that coming into a new organization with a little bit of dust in the air? Obviously, the macroeconomic environment is shifting a little bit too. Did you have an approach, or was it more, hey, I just leaned on my experience and kind of vetted it out?
I did. It was a little of both. So I leaned on my experience coming in. I knew just through the interview process that I was going to need to look at leadership within IT, which every CIO has had to do at some point. So I knew there was going to be some restructuring there. What I was more challenged with was not only just kept getting up to speed on the business, but also the CEO, who's about 4 years new now, had this huge transformation program that she really was bringing in a lot of new executives to help execute on. So coming up to speed on what that was, what it meant for the IT organization, and then the third piece, which I wasn't as familiar with, but quickly learned, was where is IT? So I have historically had I think, luxury of owning everything technology in a company. Anything that you light up on a network or use in a computer sense, I've always owned. And at Bose, it's different because there's a very big product engineering group who leverages a significant amount of technology, and I have a peer on that side, kind of the CTO role. So really understanding that dynamic, how we play together, what are some of the things that we could do better, because there's so much dependencies on the two, was another challenge that I took on and had to figure out how to approach when I got there, though. I didn't know ahead of time. So that was something that kind of came at me once I started. And, the leadership, I literally just hired a year later, I just hired my last leader. So it's been a little tough. I've been deep dive into owning security and being CIO for a while, got a CISO, owning PMO and being CIO, and then owning global apps and being a CIO. So now I have leaders over all those. Yes. And so I think now I can get back to what I want to do in talking to the business, my peers, about what's going on really in your areas and how can we help.
Yeah, I think maybe, I'll go to you here, but I think we were talking to Bob and Brian a little bit about just the CIO role, IT in general, being more of a, especially through COVID, being much more of an enabler to the business and kind of rebranding not just go fix stuff and make sure that, the internet works or whatever, but really a strategic part of the business. It seems like at Bose it kind of already is, because you've got IoT devices and it's baked into the product. It's kind of an engineering firm. But I think the role of the CIO, and we were talking a little bit about, it's been elevated. Now, what do you do with that? Right. So, I don't know, maybe you want to speak to that a little bit, but we spoke to Bob about the elevated role, and then kind of what do you do now, right, to further get into what the business is moving forward with, right, and not find out after the fact, but kind of be driving some things. So maybe, yeah.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So hopefully there aren't a lot of business folks watching because they probably aren't going to like my view of this. So I think that CIOs have historically had to wear both hats. We've had to wear the business hat. We've had to wear the IT hat, right? It's just, you can't be a strong IT leader, and if you're not in tune to how the business operates, and you need to learn it. If you don't know it, you need to learn it because that's how we were better enablers, right? So I am seeing this, just what you've heard from Brian, that and Bill, Bob, that the role of the CIO is now, it seems to be transforming to Uber enabler. So what I'm seeing is we're being brought in as, instead of partner and co-sponsor, kind of as a little bit elevated, almost leading it with our business partners right here instead of here or here. And if we're not there, because we've been doing this for the last year, we're finding creative ways to inject ourselves into these transformation initiatives because they're not going anywhere, right? So if I see things spinning, I huddle my team and I go, how do we tap me in, coach? How do we get into this and create and figure out without intimidating how to get this thing kickstarted, executed, and ultimately implemented? And there's several scenarios like that, but that I've witnessed. And my prediction is, and I might be retired when it happens, but I feel like it's happening already when I talk to recruiters, because IT folks, the leaders, have always had to have the business and the IT piece. It's not the same on the business side. Business leaders have not had to have the technology acumen to do their jobs well. Because we have both, and the technology is now so key to things getting done and implemented the right way and adding the business value, you're hearing about CIOs now rolling into business lead roles, right? Also hearing, because I've talked to a few recruiters and they're saying this phenomenon is starting to happen where they're starting to call them to say, we need a CIO to run our supply chain. We need a CIO to run our digital, our customer experience areas, because we already have both. And the learning curve for the business folks to get the technology is a stretch. And we've heard some stories, right, where companies have taken business leaders and put them over areas that have heavy technology components to it, and it hasn't worked out. And it has nothing to do with the business leaders. I'm not putting down our business peers. Yeah. But I'm saying it's just such a steep learning curve, and it's something we've been doing for years, just because we've had to. So when I hear a couple of recruiters saying, yeah, I've had two CEOs say, I want a CIO who's worked in the retail industry and has a lot of experience with customer experience and marketing and branding, because I'm going to put them in charge of that and improving our customer experience. I want a CIO who's heavy in a manufacturing company, knows operations very well, because I'm going to put them in charge of operations. I'm going to make them our next COO. And I think that's a real transformation that's happening until the business side starts to catch up on the technology knowledge that's needed to really make these digital transformations move forward.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point. Kate, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of thoughts.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah.
First, I'll say it's really nice to hear. Not nice, because we have a similar challenge in that I work for an engineering company too that develops tools and software and services that we are providing to customers, and so we do also grapple a little bit with, like, where do you draw that line between, what is IT driving and owning, what is IT supporting, and where does IT stay out? Because I have the exact same mindset that you do, that we should be making the technology decisions for the company and solving business problems, not implementing software. And so it's been an interesting, I've only been in the CIO role for 18 months. I've been with Akamai for almost 24 years. So I've, kind of grown up here, but we're on this little journey of trying to elevate ourselves to become more strategic business partners, and to say, hey, when it comes to technology decisions, IT should be driving. We should be at the front of the room, leading the conversation, facilitating the business discussion, really starting from what is the business problem you're trying to solve, and then leveraging all the knowledge that we have about the business process and all of, kind of the ecosystem that Akamai has already. Where can this fit in? How does this fit into our technical strategy? Because we have a technical strategy. And when, we definitely have areas where, business stakeholders, it's so easy to go out and procure SaaS software now.
Yes.
They'll go out and buy a tool and say, hey, IT, can you now come help us implement it? And I'm trying to sort of change that engagement model. So we're here saying, don't choose the tool, help us understand your problem, and then we'll help to choose the tool with you. And it's an interesting conversation because, Akamai has been through the years really allowed a lot of our business stakeholders to make technology decisions, and it has resulted in like a proliferation of duplication. We've got lots of tools that are doing the same things for different groups, and you can't leverage the buying power, and it's not all fitting into your tech strategy. And then you've got security issues and integration issues, and so it sounds like we're on a very similar journey. But
yes, it does. I'm sitting here going, okay, great. We need a support group. There's someone else.
The CIO Association, right? It's the it is interesting that you make an interesting point about IT becoming a more business savvy, right? And I think I want to catch up on what you're doing within your organization to do that. I also, to your point, I think it's flipped too. With like I'm in sales, right? A business leader. I'm seeing that the future is I need to be more technical, right? Technically savvy with our marketing technology stack, our sales technology stack. I think the traditional sales leader, it's not the let's go play golf and that's how business gets done, right? It's scale, automation, process tools are really layering in there. And I think that in my vocation, if you don't educate yourself to be a little bit more tech savvy, and Bob Solis was mentioning that he's seen kind of the tech savviness because of COVID and working from home and trying to figure things out. It's bumped up a little bit, right? People aren't calling into the help desk with the same questions they did 4 years ago because they kind of had to figure it out, right? Which has allowed his team to go work on maybe more strategic things. So on that front, in terms of kind of leading into the future, are you with the people that you're hiring? I'm assuming you got your leaders in place. I'm sure you're hiring a little bit different. Making sure people have that skill set. And then, for people that, Bose, I've worked with Bose for a long time. A lot of people have been there for a long time who are, maybe don't have that. So in terms of leading into the future, right, is it enabling or providing enablement for your teams on, whether it be classes or courses or mentorships or whatever, to become more business savvy, if that makes sense?
Yeah, so it starts with it's kind of fundamental, and it's usually the exercise that people hate going through. It's talking to them about the behaviors that need to change to make us more even enticing to our business partners as far as wanting to work with us because we know their business and we understand their business challenges. So it is very much a challenge to have a team that is waiting for someone to come to them with a problem. I can't tell you how many times since I've joined where I've said, we have 10 big pillars around transformation that our CEO wants to do. One of them is in supply chain. Okay, so what are we doing about that? We have an old ERP we're waiting for the business to come up with their new strategy and business process. Or we need to understand what the business wants to do around B2B. And my response is, we're not waiting for that, right? What do we need to do to get something? And it's the kickstart, right? So if we need to transform how we are doing supply chain, and it's a big piece of how we do it is now our ERP, and we're going to replace our ERP. I want you to go find the top ERPs out there and let's do demos of what out-of-the-box technology is available for them so they can start seeing the art of the possible and things that they probably have never seen before. So I told my team, I said, you're making an assumption that the business area, and this isn't an insult to the business area, knows what good looks like. And if they've been at the company as long as some of the IT folks, None of us, they don't know what good looks like, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's about raising your hand and saying, we need outside help. We
Mm.
need to see what the latest industry best practices are. We need to see what the trends are. A lot of these products we know now create a lot of business value and process out of the box, right? We all try to strive for out of the box solutions. And I think, I tell my team, if you come in, this is one example, if you come in with some solutions that are out there and show them these out of the box capabilities, I would bet you're going to see, look around the room and they're going to go, huh, oh, okay, well, yeah, that'd be great. That's a great idea. So that to me is,
Mm.
I see, changing how we behave, changing how we operate. Don't sit back and use the excuse of, well, they haven't come up with their business strategy. Well, we can come in with some recommendations, some ideas, some show and tells, so that we can, be seen more as the catalyst, as opposed to, as you've probably heard from Brian and Bob, the enabler, and people who are just there to implement. Kate, like you said, once decisions have been made, I want my team bringing in the solutions and show and let them, ingest it and say, yeah, that works. No, that doesn't work. Yeah, that's great, because they do have the Bose knowledge. They got to, in some cases, we need that knowledge to go away. The
Mm.
company right now is a lot has been simplified under Lila, our CEO, who is honestly the reason I joined. She's just phenomenal. But she has simplified the organization, is moving to simplification to focus on what we need to do, right? So the way things were set up in the past, we can't have folks saying, yeah, just take that and put it on something bright and shiny new.
Yeah.
We have to be able to say, if we're starting from scratch, what would we do? And that's very different for business and IT folks to kind of rationalize.
Yeah, I feel like it's maybe historically kind of like sticking your nose in something that you shouldn't be, right? From an IT perspective. And so maybe, Kate, on your side, how have you, I mean, and you've been CIO for 18 months, but obviously in a senior leadership role in IT for a long time. How do you do that in terms of getting, trust, confidence of the business to where it's not sticking your nose, but you're a trusted partner, who has just as much influence over what's happening as anybody, considering you're the one that's probably going to have to do a lot of the implementation and execution of making it work. So have you seen that change where, you're not invited, you're invited to the fourth meeting where they've already made a decision versus the first one? What is there techniques or things that you've done to try to get ahead of those?
Yeah, no, that's definitely something that I've experienced, and certainly something that we're trying to, again, kind of improve what I'm calling the engagement model. And part of that is this idea that within IT, you need to have a team members that have domain expertise, because if we want to be able to say, hey, trust us in IT to learn about your business problems and facilitate a conversation with vendors and run an RFP and think about how to re-engineer your business process so you're following best practice or leading practice, as opposed to doing things, I'll call it the Akamai way, because we've definitely developed a lot of stuff just kind of organically over the years that's not following any kind of leading practice, but more just like the way Akamai did it, just because. So, and I realized and I recognized that we did have a gap in IT where we had some really strong technical team members, and we had folks who know how to implement software, and they've learned something about business domain, but we don't in all areas have that expertise. So we created this role that we're calling the business technology partner. And these are people who have kind of industry domain experience, have kind of sat in the seat and said, hey, trust me, I've been there. I understand what you guys are trying to accomplish. And I also understand the broader landscape around technology solutions. And I also understand the Akamai technology ecosystem. And, this person is there to take them through that process, facilitate the conversations, and then connect all the dots behind the scenes with all of the IT people, because there's a whole ton of folks within IT, architects and software engineers and business systems analysts and change management people. And all of those people need to come together to work together to accomplish what is ultimately a business problem, not necessarily a technology problem. So that's how we're trying to approach it. And so this idea of this business technology partner is new. And so, we're hoping that will help facilitate that conversation that you were talking about, Kathy, where it's IT should be driving that. We shouldn't be waiting for them.
Exactly. That's great. That's a great role.
Yeah, no, it's funny. I was thinking about ways to not just say, hey, we're going to be doing something different, but like we have a title, like it's kind of a real formal thing, right? Like we have a person whose job it is to bridge this, and maybe and I think that if I'm a business leader, okay, wow, that's different than an IT person joining a meeting.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
And so
Yeah.
it's interesting to create a different role or title that kind of like really hits home the point that you're trying to get with the business folks and whatever else. So, Kathy, have you done anything similar like that? Or when you think of, obviously hiring people in with that background, you bring someone in with it, maybe that's part of it too, right? That they show up and it's like, oh, that's a different conversation that I've had with an IT person in a while, right?
Right. And I think for technology people, especially those who might be trying to climb the career ladder, that's an ideal role, just career development, right? Getting to understand business, working with the business, and also having the technology component. I used to, when I was at Eversource, we had what was called business relationship managers, but they were there to understand the business needs, et cetera. But it sounds like what you're describing, Kate, is what I was hoping that I had my managers doing in their different business domains, but they're not. It's really, and like you said, it's more around bridging that gap, being there to also talk to the technology folks and make sure that we're focused on delivering that value, or someone ideally at the table hearing a business need and jumping right in with a hey, we can help. And this is so timely. I was at a meeting yesterday here, and I've asked to join a lot of meetings now just because of that, business meetings, going through priorities and things like that. And there was a couple of things said in the meeting where I was doing the hey, and I had 4 IT people in the meeting, and it's just cricket silence. They're so focused on, okay, we're waiting for them to pick their priorities, and then we're going to staff IT resources to deliver. And I'm sitting there, and finally, and I had promised them I wouldn't say anything, but I lied, and I jumped in. I said, "Hey, we do that in IT already. We can probably, something as simple as monitoring. Someone said they were going to set up their own NOC, and I'm like, what? And I'm waiting for someone else to react, and no one's saying anything. So of course I said, hey, we have a NOC. If you need to monitor something, that's probably half an FTE offshore. Call us, we can support that. And that's those little tiny things where we are showing the rest of the company we can help with just basic things that they were challenged with. Because if you think about a small group trying to set up their own NOC, that's insanity. First of all, it's going to be a disaster. And second of all, it's a waste of company money.
Exactly.
And Bose has historically also been able to, everyone's been able to buy whatever they wanted, whenever they wanted. I often joke, I was like, I wish I was here. It feels like we were printing money at some point in this company. Some of the things that we purchased. But now, everything's tight. We have this great new CEO, and culturally, people are struggling with the fact that sometimes they get told, we need to go check with Kathy first if you want to put this in the cloud or you want to buy the SaaS. But it's all for the good of the company. So I think having the executive leadership supporting the shift, but I think a role like that, if you can get someone with the right skill sets, it's just the right skill set to speak up so I don't have to be there is going to be critical too.
Yeah, exactly. Because you need someone with credibility too, right? Someone who sits in the room and says, hey, I can speak your language. I've been there. I've had experience in doing what you're doing. So you trust me to help you, to partner with you. That's what we're here for. I do the same thing, which is funny. I'm trying to evangelize and market sort of like, what does IT do? What is our role? Let us take this work on that is not core to your mission. You shouldn't be doing IT stuff. You shouldn't be worried about, monitoring systems or building a knock.
Right.
You should be worried about doing whatever it is, is core to your mission as an organization within this company. So let us do our job and let you do your job, and we'll all be happy.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I'll age myself here in a big way, but I remember when retail was just shifting online, right? So you had internet marketing and IT, and that was it, right?
Yeah.
And they don't speak each other's languages, and IT would put stuff up on the website that would, do something, break something, and IT would say no to everything. And then they created this role called e-commerce, right? Director of e-commerce, vice president of e-commerce, who spoke both languages.
Yeah.
Right. And that kind of, they could keep IT honest with, hey, you're right, we shouldn't be doing this, or you know what, maybe you're just being difficult for the sake of it. And they kept marketing, here's why we can't do that. And you're putting the business at risk or security, whatever it was. But that role in between, that's maybe a kind of more dramatic situation than what you're talking about. But that role was the bridge that moved everybody forward in the right way. And it kind of changed the game and allowed retailers to really accelerate their online presence.
Yes.
In a controlled environment, right?
Right, absolutely. And we literally just went live with our first country in or Salesforce this past Monday, and going. So we're revamping our whole e-commerce omni-channel platforms. And the good news, besides, it's these big projects are always complex and hard. But the good news about doing these big, hard, complex projects is you can put in a new operating model. And to your point, we've identified those roles that will play that bridge, and will manage the technology team, but also work side by side. We've literally paired everybody on the business side, in marketing and commerce and service with a counterpart lead from IT from our global apps group. So it was a great time to be able to do that. And I think, to your point, Kate, I think it's going to be invaluable having them there.
As you build that team out, Kathy, and you're at Bose, where the culture is pretty strong, right? And people have been there a long time and a lot of pride, which is great in lots of ways. But to your point, maybe there's like Akamai, a few biases that you might pick up over a couple of decades coming in and whatnot. How have you thought about building culture? It's something that the CEO is already kind of doing it, right? And her, and so there's some momentum there, but maybe expanding it to IT specifically. How have you approached that concept or idea of culture, especially now? We haven't really got into the flex work and work from home and hiring people that haven't met each other and everything else, but hiring people new, have people that have been there for a long time, working from home, in some ways, shape or form. What's your thought on culture, and how have you tried to approach that to build the right environment for that cohesive? Because you have to have a good culture and trust, right, to go do the things that you're talking about doing within not just IT, but within the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, absolutely. So, CEO has been a big help because like I said, most of her new direct reports are all new to the company. So she's been, pounding that drum around where we need to take new ideas from the outside and couple them with ideas from internally. And everybody needs to be open on both sides to hearing each other talk about, the value or why they feel something can't change or why someone feels that there's opportunities to make changes. So when you have it from the top and you see that happening with the leaders in the company, it's an easier push into the organization. So my new leadership team, I have 2 folks who have been with the company for a while. I have 3 new folks, and they're all from 3 different industries. I like to brag a little bit about my diverse team because it's not just diverse in the typical ways. The last hire I just did, I was adamant that I needed a female because I had all men. But some of them come from, she comes from a smaller organization but has extensive experience with e-commerce. And I have a CISO who came from Accenture. And, so when they all get in a room and they're talking not only about what we need to get done, but their experiences from the outside, I made sure I kept the folks that have been with Bose for a while who are open to hearing it. And it was a little bit of a test, to be honest with you, when I first started, feeling them out. One of them I promoted into the director role, but I was testing them a little bit to see if they were going to be those people in the room who got defensive, if there was any recommendations, or wouldn't, just weren't open to hearing different ways of doing things. They are not. It's so nice when I sit in a room and one of the gentlemen who's been here for a while, and he sits there and goes, "That sounds like a great idea. We should try that. So do you have a template on that?" And someone from the out, yep, I brought all my templates from my last job. So, the culture at the leadership team, the leadership level for my team, I think is good. We have a lot of work to do underneath. So it has not transformed down into the ranks. And to your point, that is really right now where the biggest challenges are on executing and operating and moving quickly and accountability. And my leadership team and I are talking extensively about how we have this year, or I've said, we have this year to make that shift or make a change.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's hard. Again, I will say similarly, there are a lot of people who have been at Akamai for a long time. And I will say the one thing that always makes me so optimistic and proud is the team is so open to trying new things and learning new things, which is though different than actually, doing them. So to be open to it is great. Like that's step one. But it's human nature to fall back on where you're comfortable and fall back to what you know. And so that's where we're trying so hard to get people to shift their mindset, to think about their jobs in a different way, to say, when I'm sitting at the table, what is my role? Because it's different than it was yesterday. We're asking you to do something different, to think differently, to approach the work differently, to ask different questions. And that it just takes time, but the first step is to have the people who are open to the change, who see the benefits, who see, that it actually will help to develop their careers and their skills. And, but it's definitely not an overnight thing. It takes a while. It's a lot of work.
What is that saying? Culture trumps strategy every time. If your culture is not there, you will not be able to execute on your strategies. It's just, and it does take time, and it's a lot of hard decisions, right? Because you can't wait forever for someone to change, or you need to recognize quickly that people aren't going to change and address that. But yeah, we're going through a significant cultural shift. I think there's a big shift at Bose across the board, but I know there's a significant one in IT, but I think it's happening everywhere in the company. Again, the CEO is just bringing in a whole different approach of transforming this organization. I think she's doing everything right, or trying to get it done.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And it sounds like anybody that sees it is going to benefit from it.
Right.
Well, I'm sure it helps with recruiting. There's lots of things, right, around the kind of the new Bose or whatever you want to call it. You just kind of people that you're bringing in to be part of that change, to be a change agent. And we haven't talked much tonight. We're kind of at time, I think, here. We could probably talk for a lot longer. I think, we didn't talk much about kind of back to work and flex work and whatever else. We didn't talk much about COVID, which is interesting that, there's lots of change happening and transformation. And maybe those things are kind of helping. I don't know if they're helping drive it or not, or maybe it gives you the opportunity to say, hey, why don't we do things a little differently moving forward?
Yeah.
So that's kind of been a common narrative, is let's not go back to exactly the way that we did things before, but what have we learned and how do we apply it moving forward? And then you have the market, the macroeconomic issues kind of forcing some decisions on cost and where you're spending money and resources and headcount, right? And I think all of those things kind of are all part of culture. What culture you want to, leveraging those to build the culture or change the culture, because those are big things that I think have impacted the way we do business today, even if it's not, even if we didn't talk about it today. I think those are probably things that have had some impact in it.
Yeah, no, absolutely agree. I mean, we all I think agree that the hybrid work model is here to stay long term, right? Yes. I think that where I'm still not sure if it's a long term trend or not, is what I call this ubiquitous hiring, which is really hiring from anywhere. So I've done that. I have 3 leaders who aren't in our region. I'm not sure if that's long term, but that does weigh into, I think, the culture. So when you think about, and we're struggling with it now, is this, a lot of CEOs want everyone in the office. Oh, we hired a lot of people remotely. And my CISO said it perfectly. He said, so if I'm sitting on my couch and I'm reprimanding someone who didn't go in the office, I feel a little hypocritical.
Mm.
Right?
Yeah.
If I even know if they're in the office. So I think, that's still a TBD on, are companies going to continue to hire from anywhere? And if they are, I think that has a dramatic shift, good and bad, on how the culture of an organization, right? Because I do think that can be a challenge from an equity. And if you have challenges and people think things aren't fair, then they're not going to give you their best effort because they're focused on that. So I think that's, the whole hybrid work post-COVID world, that's one of the challenges. I will say that I think I was wrong in my prediction 3 years ago where I said that I didn't think companies could continue to be productive. It wasn't with everyone working hybrid and remotely. I didn't think it was sustainable. I knew it was a necessity, but I said, yeah, it's not sustainable. It's going to start impacting the bottom line for sure. I don't think that's happened. I think we still have, I think we mentioned the challenges with new employees not being engaged or not being able to network. And we have other challenges related to how employees work with each other and things like that. But I haven't seen where companies are saying, well, we didn't hit our numbers because people aren't back in the office.
Right.
I wouldn't have predicted that like 3 or 4. I'll admit when I'm wrong, and I was definitely wrong.
Yeah.
So-
You started at a company, that's obviously got quite a bit of a hybrid remote workforce, and
yeah.
Maybe this is my final thought. It's funny right now. I'm sales team, right, and we hire typically people in region, right, New York, Boston, to cover a territory. We haven't done that the past couple of years. It's really who's the best person, because no one's going on site, no one's going in the office. Now it's like, well, people are. So do I need to hire if I have a great person, but they're in Dallas, and the territory is in Chicago,
right?
We're absolutely changing that back to, okay, we need someone in Chicago, maybe over. Now sales is different, on site a little bit different, but kind of we're starting to see that I am in my world right now when, like as we talk and we interview. So anyways. Cool. Well, I know we're over time, Kathy. It was awesome talking to you. Kind of a couple different paths we went down, but really interesting to hear more about your journey, where you're at, and the things that you're doing at Bose, which is super exciting. And Kate, appreciate your input and thoughts and everything as always. Always good to see you.
Yeah, this was phenomenal. I feel like, Kathy, we are such kindred spirits, and we do need to.
Yeah.
We definitely have similar challenges, that's for sure. So
yes.
I hope we get to have these conversations more often. This has been great.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Thanks, guys. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.